Hey guys, Michael Ingledew and a la James Corden, I'm taking you on a journey with me today because I've got a relatively long journey and I'm off to see a client today where we're actually going to be talking about interactive manuals and some technology that they have. And although in UK terms it's a relatively long journey, it's 2 hours, but on our roads it's a little bit painful. Now, as I said, this is a la James Corden. That doesn't mean I'm going to break into song, and it certainly doesn't mean that we're going to have Beyonce jumping in the passenger seat at any time now. But what you will get is you will get an answer to one of your questions that was sent in to us here at TDW. Now, I hope that the quality of the video is good enough and the microphone above me, which Lewis set up for me, should be working perfectly fine. If not, I will answer the question again, but when we are behind our computers. Now, the question that came in to us, and we're getting lots of questions now, and please keep them coming in because you're driving the content for our magazine, for our YouTube tutorials, and for TDIQ, the online training and learning portal. Now, the question that came in is an organization is not entirely convinced that they should be using a specification approach to their tech data. Now, that's a great question because there are questions you should ask yourself before embarking on a TD strategy that involves S1000D, DITA, ATAI spec. And what I do is I give organizations questions that they should ask themselves before they embark on going down an S1000D route or another XML driven route. So the questions you should ask yourself: number one, make sure that if you decide not to do it or you decide to do it, do you gain a commercial or competitive advantage? Or if you decide not to do it, are you precluded from business opportunity? So for example, if your customers are asking for data in a specific format or in a specific structure and you're unable to deliver it and produce it, are your competitors offering it as a solution to your customers? And if so, then obviously the question is, should you be doing it to maintain a competitive advantage? And lots of people do, and lots of organizations do go down these structured routes to gain a commercial advantage by leveraging technology, by leveraging specifications. Secondly, the question you should ask yourself is, I'm just waiting for this guy to come past, who seems to be slowing down for some really bizarre reason. The second question you should ask yourself is the life of your product or the life of your project. If you are working on a project that only has a couple of years life, or it's going to be superseded at some point, you've got to question whether you're going to see the benefits of using something like a structured approach, a data reuse approach. And if you haven't done it yet, go and have a look at the 5 myths of S1000D, where we talk about data reuse and we talk about the myths associated with reuse, especially using something like S1000D. Less so when you're using something like DITA, because at the end of the day, DITA is philosophically the same approach as S1000D, but actually the way that you implement it is slightly more sensible in many ways. And we have tutorials on the differences between. But you need to decide whether the life of your product or your project warrants the investment in a XML driven approach. That's key. If your sole purpose, number 3, if your sole purpose is to produce PDF, your sole purpose is to produce PDF, don't waste your time and your money investing in something that really essentially is geared more to interactive manual deliverables. You can create PDF in lots of very cheap and affordable ways. Unstructured FrameMaker, Microsoft Word. There are cheap tools that you can create PDF with. So don't use S1000D or Ditta if your sole purpose is to produce PDF. Can you do it? Yes, you can do it, and it makes absolute zero sense if that's all you're planning on doing. If you want to create a PDF and all you want to do, look at alternatives. Make sure there is desire within your organization to actually implement a production philosophy that involves things like S1000D or Ditta. I worked with a very talented technical communicator, and I won't name her and I won't name the organization, and she could see the benefit of using something like S1000D on a platform. Now, it was new to the country and it was new to their military hardware on implementing S1000D, but she could see the benefits of doing it. She managed to get herself educated on how to do it. She got the authorization from within her organization to actually implement it and use it on the new platform. And the problem is that the belief and the desire of the team behind her wasn't there. And at every juncture, at every opportunity, the organization that was supposed to be supporting her put barriers in the way. So much so that S1000D was actually frowned upon. It got a very bad name, and she actually ended up leaving the team and moving on. And but the S1000D implementation was absolutely the right choice for that product, for that organization, and for that product. But there it is, you've got it. Now, don't think you can go into something like S1000D or Ditta and think you can do it cheaply. This comes down to the cost curve that we produced on TDIQ. We talk about the S1000D cost curve, which is very similar to the Ditta cost curve. And if your organization is not willing to invest in tools, skills, software, then I really wouldn't advise an organization to go down the route, because there is an investment. And this is why I say you need to ask yourself the question whether the life of your project warrants that investment. And if it doesn't, then guys, stick with what you're doing today. Now, lastly, I would say make sure that your organization understands and knows the changes in production philosophy that will be required from an IT perspective, from the tooling, from the skills that you're going to need to acquire, not just around S1000D and XML or Ditta and XML or ATA iSpec and the structures associated with that. Make sure that your organization understands that there might be IT and process changes within your organization to be able to successfully adopt the processes that are associated with the production of XML driven data. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about XML driven data essentially. Make sure that before you do this, now we've talked about that, I've already given you sort of 4 or 5 questions that you should ask yourself, but one of my passions is understanding the challenges of the end user and your customer and making sure that they can use what you are producing. Don't go racing off down an XML route or a Ditto route or an S1000D route, and you start implementing a structured approach only to realize that your end users are actually inhibited. One of the things that I ask organizations to ask themselves is, are we inhibiting or are we enabling our users from actually being able to do what they need to do? And often we are delivering data in ways and formats that they simply cannot access, cannot use, or would prefer to use in a different way. These are questions that we should ask ourselves. So there are a few things for you to think about whilst I'm driving down the M27 here down to Somerset to go and see my customer, and then I'm off to Bristol for some meetings tomorrow, where I might, if this has come out okay, do another on the road tutorial. Now I promised you that I wouldn't sing, so I won't, and a la James Corden, I'm gonna say thank you very much for listening. I hope you found it useful. Go ahead and create your free account on our website. Don't forget that that's completely free. You can get access to some other vendor resources that, as they release them, our members will send us links to resources that we post there. Go ahead and buy a subscription to our magazine, where we cover topics like this and answer your questions in a little bit more detail. And those of you who can afford it, buy a subscription to TDIQ, the online training portal, where we cover these kind of topics but in much more detail, giving real examples supported by fact and background information. I'm Michael Ingledew. If you're in Seville, look forward to seeing you. If you're coming to TDW Live this year, I'm going to be doing a tutorial on that this afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you then. Cheers. Bye.